if it's going to start. Well, good afternoon and welcome back to Enterprise and Creativity. This week, I'm delighted to welcome our guest speaker, Konrad Urban. Konrad Urban studied philosophy at St. Andrews and at Durham before that. And he is a second-time founder, and his current business is called Knit Places. This session is part of Enterprise Week, so welcome to all of you who are not actually studying enterprise and creativity, but are interested in that subject. So I will hand over to Konrad and ask him to introduce himself.
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you for the kind introduction. So I'm still trying to figure out how to show my presentation. I'm not sure it will be necessary.
Okay. If you, I don't know what your device is like, Konrad, but you should have a little like a rectangle with an arrow pointing upwards. On my screen, it's next to the camera and the microphone icons. And if you click on that, it will give you fantastic. You got it.
Okay, perfect. So can you see, can everyone see this? And can everyone also see me at the same time? Because just staring at slides is probably a bit boring.
Your camera's not on at the moment, Konrad. But yes, when you put the camera on, we'll be able to see you and I can see the slides.
Okay, so was I off the entire time or?
No, you were on to start with, but it's fine. Don't worry about it. We're all learning all the time.
Great. So is it possible to have the webcam on and screen share at the same time?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Let me just. Okay, so apparently on my device, I can't screen share and show my face. So, yeah. So I'm just gonna stick to my face.
Sorry about that, Konrad. I'm learning something new every day.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. It might be a Chrome permissions thing. Anyway, so yeah, thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction, and let's get going. So my talk today is about learning to listen in order for you to learn. So my catchy title is Learn to Listen to Learn. And I wanted to start off with talking a little bit about my humble self and the company I've now co-founded, and then we will move straight to the actual part, which will be about listening, about creating an MVP, a minimum viable product, and about how to talk to customers, especially first customers, early customers, and how to listen to them, and then how to deal with data and what some common pitfalls are about using data and being data-driven rather than data-informed. So, about myself, my name is Konrad. I'm currently the co-founder of Knit. Knit is a virtual event platform where you can run conferences, where you can run meetups, community meetups, you can socialize. Our USP is in fact socializing and networking. So if you've probably all been to a conference, on a conference usually we'll have a panel discussion, some workshops, maybe a lecture. All those things can be done on Knit. And our main USP is the networking, which would normally happen spontaneously between the talks, during the lunch break, during the coffee breaks, and so on. So normally we see ourselves very much as a virtual venue. So when one organizes a conference organizer is very focused on the talks and on the workshops and all the things that happen on the stage, and where a person gets a microphone and speaks to a large audience. But what a conference organizer is usually not too concerned about is all the things that a venue is concerned about. And those things are, for instance, the coffee tables. So if you've been to a large conference, you might have noticed that the coffee tables are very specifically designed in a way that you can only stand there with a group of maybe 3 or 4 people. A good coffee table will be such that you can't gather around in a large group of 20, and you will never be on your own. So there will be too few for you to be able to find one for yourself. And thus, those small maybe slightly too small, maybe awkwardly small, coffee tables facilitate interactions. And we see ourselves as essentially this, as, as a venue that does all the little things that we can do virtually to encourage people to interact with one another during a virtual event. So right now, for example, on Teams, there's this interesting phenomenon that I can see Bonnie and Bonnie can see me, but I see that there are about probably 30 or 40 people. And yeah, I can't see you. And I hope I will be able to mingle later on with you and ask you some questions and be open to questions myself. So that's about it. A few words about me. As Bonnie said, I'm a second-time founder. My previous company was a community connecting artists to business. Specifically, I found young Polish talent who were interested in design and art, and we produced fashion accessories, specifically silk scarves, to promote their work and to give them a fair cut. Because the problem that I noticed was that in Poland, where I'm from, young artists have no clue about business, and they have all this talent and they have all this energy, but they wouldn't know how to sell something. So I decided, well, okay, let's collaborate, and I'll do more of the business side, and you'll do what you do best. And I closed that when I went to St. Andrews, actually. So 3 years ago, 2018, I closed it after 2 years to focus on new ventures. So now about the actual topic. So the topic is learn to listen to learn. In other words, to learn to listen. And so the first thing is, what should we be learning as entrepreneurs? So when you want to set up a business, maybe you have an idea, some vision for something, you should want to learn a few things before you invest your life. Entrepreneurship is probably the biggest project. It's probably akin to, I don't know, choosing university, or sometimes some people will even say marriage. It's a huge thing, and it will be what you will spend 10 hours a day, sometimes 12, sometimes 16, sometimes 6, hopefully as well. But a majority of your non-sleeping time, you will probably think and work on your project. So you should want to learn as much as possible before you sign up for something. So what I'm referring to specifically are two things on two levels. So one is product market fit. The product market fit is essentially how well does your product fit the market, and that's one level. And the other level is maybe a bit more abstract, but the founder's fit. So if you are on your own, or maybe you have a team, it's absolutely crucial to learn about founder's fit. So for example, for myself in my previous business, I think the biggest obstacle for the growth of my first company was founder's fit, because I founded the company by myself and I did it on my own. And I'm a very social person who needs to talk to people, who likes to reach out to someone on the desk next to me. And I'm just, I wasn't able to motivate myself long term to work the hours required for a small company. It wasn't a startup, it was a small company. So the difference between a small company and a startup is that a startup scales, a small company doesn't have to. So a local pizza shop is a local company. AirBnB was a startup because you can scale it. So I didn't have founder's fits, and I think that's mainly why the company in the end failed. I had to close it. But today we will talk more about product market fit, because I think founder's fit is something that you need to be absolutely aware of and talk as much as possible, and don't think this is wasted time. Go with your founders, treat it as a if you want to found a company, treat it as seriously as you would treat probably marriage or like a very serious relationship, because even the smallest things, there will be a lot of pressure on you, can get out of hand very quickly, and you need to have ways of solving things and building things. But I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about product market fit and MVPs and talking to customers. So I would have had a beautiful slide. Maybe I'll show it because it's just so pretty.
Konrad, do you want to? Konrad,
yeah.
do you want to email me your presentation and I'll see if I can share it? Is it worth doing that?
Yeah. As you can see, can you see it?
Yes.
Yeah, these are pierogi. It's my favorite food.
Wow.
It's a Polish food. It's essentially a dumpling in this funny shape, and you can put many different things into a dumpling. I love pierogi, so I decided to use pierogi as an example for a small business. It's not a startup, a small business. So here are those tasty pierogi, and I want to talk about MVPs using pierogi as an illustration. So what's an MVP? An MVP is a minimum viable product, and all those words matter. So first of all, it's a product. So it should be something that can be brought to a market. It should be something that is sellable, and it should be minimally viable. So it should be able to get at least like one person interested. What it is not, it doesn't have to be a physical thing. So for example, if my vision was, hey guys, I want to open a pierogi delivery service in St. Andrews because all of the poor students are, pierogi is the best food imaginable. My way of doing that would probably not start with making pierogi. I would probably start with taking this picture and trying to sell that picture as a promise of delivering pierogi. So at this point, I just have an idea of producing pierogi, but I don't have to learn that much about pierogi themselves. I just need to find a picture and go around and say, hey, this is a pierogi delivery service. Would you like to buy those pierogi based on the leaflet? So it can be really, really quick and dirty. In fact, if you're lucky enough to get a customer based on your leaflet, which is just a picture of pierogi that don't actually exist anywhere or that you don't have access to, you're super lucky. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, don't worry about it. You can always buy some supermarket pierogi and sell those, just repackage them and sell them so that you don't disappoint your customer. In fact, that would be probably one of the first ways of doing it if you weren't able to do it via leaflets or a fake checkout page or something like that. So once you have the foot in the, here's my example of Airbnb. So believe it or not, but this is Airbnb's MVP. This is the actual MVP of Airbnb. So Airbnb, I don't know how many billion they're worth, but obviously one of the most successful startups. This is their MVP. They just emailed people saying, hey, we will post your stuff to Craigslist. Like, that's it. That was their MVP. They posted stuff to Craigslist. I don't know whether you know what Craigslist is. It's this American, like, sewer, essentially for ads. Anyone can put on an ad. Usually people sell, you know, old or stolen bikes or, I don't know, all sorts of stuff. And it used to be the case that people put listings for short-term apartments onto Craigslist as well. So they realized the market and they just offered owners of apartments to repost stuff from Airbnb to Craigslist and then from Craigslist to Airbnb. And already with that, they made some money. So that was the MVP. But more importantly, they were able to talk to people that way. I think that's the most important thing, to think about ways of accessing the the customer about whom you're thinking. So in our example with Pierogi, it would be students. How do you get to students and get yourself in a position where you can talk to them meaningfully about their experience with the food you are offering to them? So yeah, so an MVP for Pierogi would be supermarket Pierogi, or just leaflet with Pierogi printed on them, or something like that. You don't need to be fancy. Here are some things at this stage, definitely not to worry about. You shouldn't worry about bureaucracy. So one of the first things people think about is, oh my God, I have to set up a limited company. Okay, how do I do that? But I don't have a residency, blah, blah, blah. Like, no, at this point, you're not a business. You're not selling, you're not trading, you're still finding things out. You can do that just as a normal, legal, natural person. And just don't worry about it. As like before your first money comes in, you don't have to worry about anything. So in fact, with Knit, we've only incorporated 4 months into existing because we didn't sell anything. So we were iterating in our prototypes. So don't worry about that. Do not invest because you don't know whether your idea is worth it. Make it as cheap as possible. Usually a good MVP can be built on mock-ups. So a mock-up is when you don't have an actual product, but you just pretend to have a product. So especially for software, that's super easy to do. You can just create a Photoshop image of a product and try to sell based on that. And definitely do not build any features that are not absolutely crucial for your business. So for the MVP. So here again, the example of Airbnb. In the end, what they wanted was to have some way of people posting their apartments to a public list where people could book rooms. That was it. No map of where those apartments are. No like booking system where you could directly book the dates. Just figure it out via email. Emails are super powerful. So they realized this, and that was their MVP. Okay, so you are very lucky. You've just bought some supermarket pierogi and you're delivering them to your first customers. Now, you haven't made any pierogi yourself. You've just repackaged supermarket pierogi, and now you want to understand who your customers are, what kind of pains they have. And to do that, you have to learn how to listen really carefully. So first of all, as entrepreneurs, we get extremely excited about our projects because we put so much passion into them, we put so much love into them, and we are constantly working on them. So we are working maybe 10 hours a day on our project. So we are very keen on talking to people about them because it's like expressing yourself. It's like an artist talking about their artwork. But that way you're not going to learn anything. So don't talk when you already have a customer in front of you. Don't do any of the talking. Do all of the listening. So specifically, talk only in a way that will bring about and maximize information that's flowing from them to you. To do that, you need to kind of develop some skills that an ethnologist or anthropologist or sociologist would have. But you can do that on the go. You don't have to study sociology to become a good listener. But definitely, if you're lucky enough to have studied sociology or any field or psychology, any field that has interview techniques, that's super useful. But the key thing here is to develop empathy, to be able to listen to the emotions and to the pains that your customers have. And then once you have the pains, distinguishing between actual pains and things that they imagine to be painful. So I'll give you an example with pierogi. So let's say you delivered your first pack of pierogi, and your customer says, well, they were really cool, but you know what? Like, I think you should package them in paper because you use styrofoam, and styrofoam is really environmentally harmful. So please package them in paper. Now, what you should read in that entire logical in that entire argument that they formulated. So the argument was, I'm environmentally friendly, your product is not environmentally friendly. Therefore, if you want me as a customer, make an environmentally friendly product. And the best way of doing that is using paper packaging. That's not what you want to understand from that conversation you've had. What you want to understand is that there is a segment of your customers who are worried about environmental impact. You should not worry about exactly the feature or solution they proposed. Why? Well, because they've only had 1 or 2 minutes to think about this whole issue, and you are thinking about it 10 hours a day. So their solution will be inferior to whatever you will come up with. And I say that with absolute seriousness. I mean it. They have no stakes in how you will spend your time, right? So they can communicate what pain they have, but they are not capable of understanding what solution would be best to be the painkiller for that pain. So that's one thing. The other thing, so understanding that it's about pains and not features or solutions. The other thing is distinguishing actual pains from just polite feedback. That's one common theme. So you ask a friend for feedback and they want to say something. And you know, we all should start with FFF, so friends, fools, and family. So we should all reach out to those people first because they are the most inclined to talk to us. But we need to discount almost everything they say very heavily because, first of all, they try to be nice. And strangers will also try to be nice. So they will try to give feedback that is maybe non-essential, or they think it's really clever, but it might not be. And you need to see, especially in early stage, whether these are things, whether their pain points are pain points where you are able to solve them in a way where your value that you create is at least like 10 times, like an order of magnitude larger than what their pain point is. Why? Because if it's just a small thing, let's say they really enjoyed the pierogi, but yeah, they would prefer it to be in paper packaging rather than styrofoam packaging. Maybe for some customers that will be a no-go, but for some customers, it will be a nice to have. And you should not be building on nice to haves. You should be building at the core value proposition that you have. So if you, I can give you an actual example that we encounter all the time. So the way Knit works is you have on Knit, you will have a virtual room and you can mingle in small groups. And the way that works is each group has their own little cycle. And a very, very common feature request is, why don't you have topics for those bubbles? And I think maybe 60% of our customers mentioned it at some point. Why don't you have why don't you have topics for those bubbles? Well, we have made the informed decisions not to. Generally, we do allow them, but we don't encourage them. Usually, you won't find those topics for the individual circles, because when someone enters a circle and has a topic already, then they will feel very uncomfortable if they want to talk about something else. So you take away the mingling, the spontaneity, the organic aspect of being able to interact in small groups. And that's our crucial thing that we are doing. So we're taking away our core value proposition because of some feature that's frequently requested. So we don't do it because we understand it's not something where the customer would stop paying us or stop being interested in our product, because we solve so many other things that are currently problematic with virtual events, that not having this like little thing that they thought about won't break the deal for them. So that's really important. So to summarize this point, listen, develop empathy, listen for actual troubles that people have, and listen very carefully for troubles where you are able to solve them in a way that would like the value that you are offering would be 10 times bigger, because otherwise you might have trouble selling later on. If it's not a very obvious value that you're providing, then you might have problems selling. So in this case, for example, with hungry students and Pierogi, your value could be something like, well, either it's Pierogi because they're awesome, so that's a value in itself, or maybe your delivery is super fast, or maybe your USP would be that they're homemade and made out of healthy ingredients, and you use paper packaging and it's all eco-friendly or whatever, but you need something where at least some segment of your customers would say, wow, that's 10 times better than everything else around it. So to reiterate this point, listen to pain points, never talk about solutions, never talk about exact features. So here's an example, an interior designer, a friend of mine who's an interior designer had, and so she was building a kitchen, and her client wanted to have the same door handles or doorknob on the kitchen cupboards as on the actual doors they had in the flat, because they thought it would match nicely. The problem is the way you open a cupboard is completely different to a door. So it's just not, it doesn't solve the same issue. So customers generally will not understand what will solve the pain they have. So avoid talking about features and refocus the conversation on the pain. So here's an example of how a conversation like that could go. So I've just delivered my first pierogi, and I say, hey, like, what do you think about this? And the customer says, well, the pierogi was super tasty, but I would really prefer if the packaging was made out of paper. And then instead of saying, oh yeah, okay, paper, I'll write that down. Don't do that. Ask, oh, okay, like why would you prefer paper? And they would say, well, paper is more eco-friendly. And then you would say, okay, so if I understood you correctly, you are worried that our styrofoam is not environmentally friendly, and that's why you would prefer an environmentally friendly solution. And they say, yeah, exactly. And then you write down, okay, some customers worry, like one customer worried about the environmental impact of our packaging. That's the way to go about it, rather than writing down they want paper packaging. That's not a good answer. Why? Because paper packaging for pierogi doesn't work, because it will just fall apart. So another common thing is, very related to this, do not accept feature requests. So in this case, for example, the customer saying, well, okay, I will buy pierogi every day if you do, I will buy your pierogi every day. The only thing you have to change is make paper packaging. In my experience, this customer will probably, or this prospect, sorry, will probably not convert into a customer. So this person will not stay with you long term, probably. More often than not, people kind of like a product, but they're not entirely sure, and they will find excuses, or they will make requests, change requests, to give themselves a good excuse of not accepting the product. But actually, somewhere deep in their heart, they don't actually want it, or they don't actually need it. In fact, the way to overcome that, to distinguish between the people who actually need that specific change for their business to run, and the people for whom it would be nice to have, and they're just kind of being picky, or they're not decisive or whatever, is ask them for a letter of intent. So ask them for an LOI. An LOI works like this. It's essentially, it can be an email or a letter saying, if this happens, I will be your customer and I will pay, I don't know, £200 a month for my Pierogi subscription. I will, whatever, I will buy 1,000 Pierogi every month for my restaurant or something like that. Usually these would be more like B2B business things, but it can be done with customers, at least in a soft form, and if you can, ask them for prepayment. If you really need them and you feel like okay, I'm going to make that feature change. I'm going to make that change in the and also, do not worry about your first customers. There will be plenty more to come. So it always feels like, oh my God, my first paying customer, huge deal. Yeah, you should be way more receptive to their needs than of the 1,000th customer. But if you lose them, that's fine. If you have a decent market, and if you've done your market research right, there will be plenty of more customers. So don't worry about catering to every little need of theirs. Currently, with NIT, I have this problem that very early on, before we had any conferences, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, I agreed to host a conference this month with a good friend. And it's a charity conference. And I was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. It will be really cool. And now it turns out it's way too much work, but I've already agreed to it. And unfortunately, I now found myself in a position where 3 months ago, I was
Konrad, we can't hear you at the moment.
Hello. How long? When did that happen?
Just for a few seconds after you talked about, after you started talking about the customer that, conference that you are finding to be too much work.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you. Essentially what happened was very early on, before we had any conference customers, we were super happy to get one, and we overpromised on a lot of stuff. And because we had overpromised, suddenly it turns out to be way more work than we would ever do for a commercial customer. And it just sucks out the focus and time out of the business. And that was a mistake that we've made because we were so desperate to get that first customer. So don't be desperate to get your first customer. Do a lot, but make sure that the value proposition at its core is the same as the product you want to learn about, or your product market fit. Because if you change too much, then suddenly you might become an agency or like some kind of consultant rather than a company. Cool. A few words before we get into questions about the difference between data informed and data driven. So there's this fashion of, I think we live in a time of like stats fetishism. Everyone wants numbers on everything, and people think numbers are like a magical solution. The truth is, yes, we have a lot of data, but unless you really have very, very good know-how on how to model it, and you have a lot of data, it's probably quite useless to you, especially at the start of a business. So a lot of businesses have all those things about, oh, you should do testing, and like you get this MVP and then the other MVP, and then you should do A/B split testing. I don't know whether you're familiar with those methods, but like a lot of statistical methods about like very strict hypotheses and statistical significance and so on. Truth is, for the numbers you will have early on in your first few months, there's no way you can get any statistical significance out of the changes that you're making, because there are so many things that will influence the way your prospects convert and so on, that there's just no way. So even with us currently after half a year, there's still no way we could iterate most things in a way where we could actually meaningfully employ statistics. It's just not possible with numbers like that. You can use those statistical methods once you have thousands upon thousands of customers, and probably paying customers as well. You should know your data. Like, we look at our Google Analytics, like how many people visit the app and so on every day, but we're not making, like, we do not do hypothesis testing, because it's not, there's just no point. Just do stats 101, and it's such a common mistake. I had a friend from a prestigious business school who wanted to do A/B split testing on like some email they send out to 200 customers. It just makes no sense. It just makes no sense with low numbers. So if you want to use statistical methods, check out what exactly the numbers are that you need for the experiment to be meaningful in any way, and make sure that all your variables are set. And it's probably early on, it's probably not worth the effort, because a good experiment is like way more work than just understanding some stuff qualitatively. So here's my praise of qualitative analysis. Sorry for the typos. So in terms of qualitative stuff, learn how to be a sociologist, learn how to listen, learn how to develop empathy, learn sociological interview methods. So for example, learn how to ask questions that are not leading questions. At the same time, learn the benefits of framing for a sales call, but try to separate as much as possible sales calls from kind of trying to understand, if you have to do them in the same call, which will usually be the case, or the same contact, the same meeting, try to devote, let's say, 10 minutes to your research stuff and then do the sales. And there can be some synergy, but beware of the pitfalls of leading questions and sampling errors. If you ask your friends for feedback, they will always tell you it's the best idea in the world. It probably isn't, and so on. So in the end, what matters are, for your MVP, when you've talked to your customers, in the end, what matters is customers who pay, especially if you're doing like software, startup stuff. A lot of the stuff you'll be offering is freemium, or like at least free, or there's some parts of it that are free. It is very likely that they will give you very bad feedback, as in feedback that is not informative for your business. So try understanding this segment that actually pays, and then try thinking about if it's a market where you have competitors, and they're doing something roughly similar, try thinking about what they do and what their unit economics and so on looks like. And that will be a much faster way of getting that knowledge than if you have to do the experiments. What's a moat? Well, a moat is a barrier to entry. And the idea here being that have two companies and they do the same stuff and they're competitors and they have a similar team and generally everything is similar, then ceteris paribus, they can make similar amounts of money. So think about which parts of what your competitor does you can't replicate. So for example, you can't open a second Facebook because you won't have the user base of Facebook. So your your second Facebook idea will probably fail, because you will never get the critical mass where there's a strong network. And if you're selling food delivery service, there's very little defensibility they might have, because you can probably make pierogi at home. So if you see a company in Edinburgh that sells pierogi and makes, you can see they're expanding, and they're hiring new people, and they seem to have money. You can probably open one in Glasgow. That's kind of the idea here. So you don't have to, what I'm trying to say here because everything was about the MVP and looking at customers, you can look at the entire market as well to get the right data on whether your idea will be a success or not. So listening is one thing. All the business side of things, like what your customer acquisition cost is and so on, is another thing. But also your competitors are a very, very useful source of knowledge to see whether your idea is worth it. So yeah, now on to questions. We've got 15 minutes left. You can email me. You can get in touch. In terms of NIT, we'll be hiring in a few months. So if any one of you are finalists, get in touch. And also, we are open to business. So if you know any online events or people online events, it would be great to talk to them.
Fantastic, Konrad. Well, thank you so much for that insight and all of the wealth of knowledge and experience that you have found so far. We've had one of our individuals, Medina. Medina, you are welcome to unmute yourself and ask your question, come on camera, or pop it into chat, whichever you're most comfortable with.
Hi everyone.
Hello, Medina, go ahead.
Thank you, Konrad, for the presentation, first of all. And my question is about don'ts. When you were talking about things that we should not do when we're creating our project, you said that we should not invest because we don't know if our idea is worth it yet. And maybe my question sounds too, maybe I sound too romantic asking this question, but how can we ask other people to believe in our project, or others to be attracted to our idea if we do not believe it ourselves?
Very good point. So I think that's a question about teams and hiring and founders fit. Essentially, how do you convince people it's a good project? Well, first you have to convince yourself. First you have to witness to your own belief in the project will be also the time invested, because obviously.
Konrad, you're breaking up quite badly. You're breaking up quite badly. I don't know if maybe you want to go off camera again.
Sorry.
It's totally fine.
Yeah,
it's technology.
Yeah, should be better on it. I was saying that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to quickly answer this this question. So the question was how to convince other people that your idea is worthwhile, and then can you use money to convince other people that your idea is worthwhile? Investing your own time and money is definitely a strong signal that you believe in the idea. But if the idea is stupid, you're wasting your own time. So that's essentially the short answer. And when I say don't invest money, I don't mean like don't spend any money. I mean like invest maybe £1,000 max, or something like that, like a small amount where you will be comfortably able to turn away from the idea. So actually with NIT, in the first 5 months, we only spent £1,200 and we're still iterating on the idea. and that's for 5 months is insanely low. Now we've spending a bit more, but and I think that's a good way of doing things, because before you're not sure, it would be a waste of time and money.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben.
Are there any other questions that anyone has? You're welcome to either raise your hand and then, unmute yourself and ask your question, or to pop your question into chat. I've obviously got some questions, Konrad, because that's just the way I am.
Yeah.
When we were sort of chatting informally at the beginning, and in your presentation, you said that one of the biggest barriers to growth for your first business was not having anyone alongside, that it was, too much really for one person, it limited your growth. And I was just wondering, what's your thoughts now? Obviously, you've got a co-founder. What are your thoughts now on how you go about finding co-founders that are going to share your vision, your values, and really be a spur to growth?
Yeah. So it's a hard question for me because my co-founder is my lifelong friend of mine, and we've known each other since primary school, and we understand and know each other probably better than anyone else. But I think it's the most important decision that can be made in a business, because it's the person you'll be spending 10 hours a day with in very stressful situations. So I don't know, I would say that going on a trip to the mountains, or generally doing something stressful and long time, like 5-day hiking trip in the mountains, is probably a good way of finding out whether you know how to deal with stress, and whether you are have all the other virtues of a founder. So dealing with stress, being empathetic and understanding, not being kind of what's the name, like not going about saying like, oh, you haven't done this, you haven't, like not blaming each other for delays or problems generally in the company, because once you start blaming each other, it will fall.
Absolutely.
I think to the mountains, or generally doing something that lasts a few days and is difficult is a pretty good idea.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Like, I don't know, something like that.
Fantastic. And I was quite delighted to hear you say to really concentrate on minimum viable product, concentrate on benefits, not features, because that's what customers or clients buy. They don't necessarily buy something because it's got this fancy feature. And I was wondering how you have dealt with that in Knit. So what are the sort of conversations that you were having with your potential customer base, and how did you come to kind of what Knit currently is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So with Knit, we were pivoting really intensively in the first 4 months, pretty much creating a prototype every month, a new prototype every month. And what we wanted to provide was the ability to meet people online. And there are a lot of companies out there that try to tackle the same problem, but I feel a bit gimmicky about how they do it. So they either portray it as a video game, or like there's like a 2D map in which you can move around. And we were stripping everything from our ideas or visions that wasn't about bringing people together. So any little bit of gimmick, key feature, graphics, whatever stuff, we just cut out immediately. And when we were talking to customers, we identified that they lacked interaction with other people during online events. So that was the big pain point, and that was what we're solving. So the conversations often went like, oh, but wouldn't it be cool to have like a speed dating feature where you would have like 2 minutes to talk to someone? We're like, oh yeah, cool. Why do you think that would be cool? And then they would say, well, because I go to a conference and I want to meet people, and we'd be like, okay, we're writing that down. So we didn't implement the speed dating. Instead, we implemented a way where you can mingle, because it solves the same problem. And we think it solves it in a better way, because the customer hasn't had the time and expertise to think about it as deeply as we have had. But we are able to identify the pain point.
I think that's a great example of how important it is to be very clear about what it is you're trying to do. And while, as you said, you may pivot and you definitely want to listen to customer advice, you know your business best and you know what you are trying to get it to do best. And I think that's really quite an interesting point, as you were saying in what you were talking about. Instead of just saying, oh, well, this customer said we should, have speed dating, so we're going to have speed dating. You thought it through and brought it back to what's going to fit best with the overall vision for KNIT and what you're trying to do. So does anyone else have any more questions just in the last couple of minutes before we close? Well, if not, I would just like to say thank you so much, Konrad, for joining us today. Really appreciate it, and for persevering with the technology challenges and the fact that KNIT is perhaps, or that Teams is not quite as easy to use as KNIT. So really appreciate that, and great to hear your story.
Thank you. I do have a question to the participants.
Of course.
How many of you know what pierogi are, and have you ever had pierogi?
If you know what pierogi are, you have Hannah.
Yes.
Carry on.
I'm Bosnian, so we have very similar food. So
fantastic.
Yeah, counts enough.
That's awesome. Yeah.
A country, so pierogi is so popular. It's the thing that we always have at home.
Oh, amazing, amazing! I'm happy. So, maybe there's a market for pierogi in St. Andrews.
That's what I was just thinking, Konrad. You need to, you can come and do a delivery business for pierogi in St. Andrews. So thanks again, Konrad, and thanks everyone for all of your questions. I hope you all have a lovely weekend when it arrives. And next week, if you're studying enterprise and creativity, the topic will be planning, business models, and strategy. And I look forward to seeing all of you next week.